Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're taking a deep dive into Alan Watts's Just So.
This book, it's a fascinating collection of some of his talks.
It really gets you thinking differently about, well, everything. We're going to focus on Watts's ideas about moving beyond dualistic thinking.
You know that tendency we have to see everything in opposites, like good and bad, or mind and matter.
Exactly. Watts challenges those categories. He wants to show us a more holistic perspective.
One of the first things he tackles is this classic model of the universe, the Newtonian model, like a billiard ball universe.
Ah, yes. I remember learning about that in school. Everything's separate, like little particles just bouncing around.
It's a model that's useful, sure, but Watts argues it's way too limited to truly explain reality.
So what does he suggest instead?
He points towards a universe that's much more fluid, much more interconnected. Everything's in flux, constantly changing. He even quotes Teilhard de Chardin, the philosopher-scientist. Teilhard said, "The whole universe is the only true atom."
Whoa, the whole universe is the only true atom. That's a powerful thought.
It makes you rethink what it means to be an individual, right? If the universe is this one big whole, where do we fit in?
I mean, are we not also part of this interconnected web?
Absolutely. And that's where Watts's critique of dualistic thinking comes in.
He wants us to move beyond this illusion of separateness.
Exactly. To see ourselves as integral parts of this larger whole.
You know, I've been grappling with that tension myself lately, wanting to be a unique individual, but also recognizing that connection to everything around me.
It's a common struggle. Like, am I a single drop of water, or am I part of the vast ocean?
That's a great analogy.
Watts talks about it a lot, this idea of everything existing in relationship. Like, you can't have a stalk without a root, or a North Pole without a South Pole.
So it's this dance of interdependence, not one force being superior to another.
Right. And instead of trying to assert our individuality separately, maybe we should embrace that interconnectedness.
See it as something essential to who we are.
Exactly. It can actually be quite liberating. Instead of feeling alone and isolated, you start to feel this sense of belonging.
I love that. But, our minds, they crave order. They crave control. We're always looking for rules and formulas, ways to make sense of the world.
Totally. And Watts addresses that head-on with what he calls the illusion of laws and control.
The illusion of laws and control. Okay, I'm listening.
He argues that what we perceive as laws of nature,
The ones that seem so fixed.
yes, he says those aren't external decrees. They're actually human constructs based on our need for predictability, for order.
Interesting.
He uses this clever analogy with a ruler.
A ruler. Okay, now I'm really curious.
So think about it. A ruler is just a tool we impose on the world.
To measure things.
Right. But those inches and centimeters, they don't actually exist in the wood itself. They're part of a human system.
Ah, I see what you're saying. We create these systems of measurement, and then we forget that we created them, like there's some inherent truth about the universe.
Exactly. We try to impose our own order on a reality that's inherently fluid and ever-changing.
And in doing so, do we miss out on something?
Maybe on some of the beauty and spontaneity of life. It's like trying to contain a flowing river in a concrete channel.
But does Watts suggest we just abandon logic and science then?
Yeah.
Throw it all out the window?
Oh, no, not at all. He acknowledges how valuable they are. They help us understand the world, navigate it.
But he cautions us against mistaking those tools for reality itself.
Yes. Like, our maps are not the territory. They're just representations.
They can be helpful guides, but we shouldn't confuse them for the vast, mysterious landscape itself.
And that leads us to another point Watts makes about the nature of reality. It's all about context.
Context is everything. Okay, tell me more about that.
He points out how much our behavior changes depending on the situation, even our sense of self.
Well, yeah. I'm definitely not the same person at a dinner party as I am, say, giving a presentation at work.
Exactly. At work, we might be all serious and professional. But at home with family, we're relaxed, we're playful.
We adapt, we play different roles. But doesn't that contradict the idea of a consistent self?
That's the big question, isn't it? If we're always changing, who are we really?
It's a bit mind-boggling.
And maybe that fixed, unchanging sense of self, maybe that's also an illusion.
So we're not static beings.
Maybe we're more like processes, always becoming, evolving, responding to our experiences.
Like chameleons. Always adapting.
Yeah. Instead of being fixed, we're more like verbs. We're in motion.
Constantly becoming something new.
I like that. It makes you wonder about all those distinctions we make. like between the material and the spiritual.
Oh, Watts definitely goes there. That's one of the most captivating parts of Just So.
I've always struggled with that. The material world has always seemed so separate from the spiritual. One is so tangible, the other's more abstract.
He actually tells a great story about this, about a Japanese philosopher. He was asked to speak about supreme spiritual ideas.
And he felt a bit out of his depth, so he just decided to describe his home and his garden in detail. And guess what?
What happened?
Standing ovation.
Wow. What was so powerful about that?
By focusing on the concrete, the physical, he showed that the spiritual isn't separate. It's right there in the everyday, in the tangible.
So instead of searching for the spiritual in some far-off realm, maybe we need to look closer to home.
Yes, in the beauty of the world around us.
So true. So true materialism isn't about accumulating more possessions. It's about truly experiencing the present moment.
Exactly, with all its richness.
Appreciating what we already have. It reminds me of that saying, stop and smell the roses.
It's about shifting our focus from acquiring to experiencing. That's a much richer way to live.
Absolutely. And a lot more in line with Watts's idea of transcending those dualities.
Because in a way, the material is the spiritual. It's all interconnected. And that interconnectedness, it even extends to our relationship with technology.
That's an interesting point, because technology often feels like the opposite of spirituality, right?
What? It's all about gadgets and gizmos, pushing for progress, often at the cost of the natural world.
Exactly. So how does Watts reconcile those two?
Well, he wasn't anti-technology. Not at all.
Yeah.
He saw its potential, huge potential. But he wanted us to move towards what he called a civilizing technology.
A civilizing technology. What does that even mean?
Technology that works with nature, not against it, not trying to dominate or control it.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah.
Because we hear so much about the negative impacts, right? Like environmental damage, social isolation.
All that stuff. But maybe the problem isn't technology itself. Maybe it's how we approach it.
Our mindset.
Exactly. Watts believed we could create technologies that enhance our lives, but without disrupting that delicate balance of nature.
I like that.
He even imagined a future where technology is so integrated it's almost invisible.
Wow. Like seamlessly woven into our lives.
Yeah. To illustrate how technology evolved, he talks about this thing called the law of peduncles.
Law of peduncles. Sounds intense.
It's a concept from biology. Basically, a bud grows out from the main body, and then it breaks off, forms something new.
And the original connection? It just disappears.
No trace left behind.
Like how we don't see many payphones around anymore, or cassette tapes.
Exactly. They've become obsolete, like they never existed. Watts applied that to technology. Outdated forms, they vanish.
So what's he saying about the future of technology then?
He thought we were on the verge of a revolution. All our clunky machines, our gadgets, they'd be replaced with something much more organic.
Interesting. It makes you wonder what those technologies might look like.
Right. Watts even talked about wireless electricity, information flowing effortlessly like a natural force.
That sounds amazing, but also a bit scary. Think about the implications for our privacy, our sense of self, in a world where everything's connected.
He gets into all that. It's where his ideas about the self, the illusion of separateness, become even more relevant.
Okay, so what does he say?
He talks about how this increasing interconnectedness will impact our personal boundaries. He even tells this funny story about himself.
Oh, yeah.
He got annoyed when strangers called him Al. It felt intrusive to him, even though they meant well.
Yeah, I get that. I think we all need those personal boundaries.
Yeah.
They help us define who we are. But how do we even define those boundaries when the world's becoming so interconnected?
That's the challenge, right? Watts calls it moving towards a one-world town. Physical distance becomes less important. We're bombarded with information.
Wow.
He says even the distinction between here and there, it starts to blur. Technology lets us experience things remotely.
Like we're all citizens of this global village.
Yeah.
All connected, interacting in real time. But what happens to our individual identities then?
Watts points to psychologists like Harry Stack Sullivan. Sullivan saw the individual as an expression of a social network.
Interesting.
So our sense of self comes from our relationships, our interactions.
So we're both individuals and part of a collective.
Yes. We influence each other. We're constantly shaped by each other. It's this complex dance.
And Watts wants us to embrace that complexity.
Instead of trying to fit ourselves into these rigid boxes.
Right. Not either, but both hand.
Exactly. It's a more dynamic, a more expansive way to understand who we are. And it makes you think about our relationship with material things, too.
Oh, for sure. Because we're told to buy more, upgrade, keep up with the Joneses.
It's everywhere. And Watts ties that back to dualistic thinking. He criticizes our obsession with stuff.
Because deep down, we know that more stuff doesn't equal happiness.
Yeah.
But we still get caught up in it.
Right. We think if I just had that new car, or if I had a bigger house.
Then I'd finally be content.
Exactly. But it's a trap. The wanting never ends.
It's like the grass is always greener.
We keep looking for something outside ourselves to complete us.
So what's the alternative?
Watts says we need to shift from acquiring to experiencing.
Okay. How do we do that?
He makes fun of some things, actually. He says Western furniture is so bulky, uninspired, and our clothing.
What about it?
Uncomfortable, lacking in joy.
I never thought about it that way.
He compares it to traditional Japanese styles, where form follows function, and there's beauty in the everyday.
So it's not about rejecting possessions altogether. It's about changing our relationship with them.
Yes. Quality over quantity, and realizing that true wealth is about experiencing the present moment fully.
That makes sense. Being present, mindful.
It's like that Zen saying, chop wood, carry water. Even simple tasks can be meaningful.
It's all about our perspective.
Watts also talks about the importance of swinging. Have you heard him talk about that?
Vaguely. Remind me.
Swinging is about spontaneity, playfulness, letting go of control.
Okay, I like that.
Because we often approach life so rigidly,
Trying to control every little thing.
And all that does create resistance, suffering.
So instead of forcing things to fit into our molds, maybe we need to learn to dance with life a bit more.
Exactly, like water. It flows around obstacles.
Effortlessly. Beautiful image.
He actually tells this great story about the Brazilian soccer team. They won the World Cup. Not by sticking to a rigid plan.
How'd they do it?
They danced to victory, moving so fluidly and joyfully.
That's a great visual. Even in competition, there's room for that joy, that spontaneity.
Right. But it also brings up the role of the mind, because we're often stuck in our heads.
Our thoughts, anxieties.
And that's where Watts introduces this really cool concept, the unborn mind.
Unborn mind. Okay, you got to explain that one.
It's a state of consciousness beyond our thoughts, our plans. A place of pure potential, creativity.
It sounds kind of mystical.
It is.
So how do we access this unborn mind? Is it like meditation, trying to quiet the mind? Or is it something different?
Watts thought we all have access to it. It's just that we block it, With all our overthinking, our worries, our need to control. He tells this funny Zen story about a goose. It's trapped in a bottle. And a student asks the master, how do you get the goose out? But you can't hurt the goose, can't break the bottle.
Oh, this sounds familiar. I love Zen stories.
And the master, he thinks for a second, and then he just says, the goose is out.
Of course. Classic Zen. It's about shifting our perspective.
Right. The solution's often simpler than we think. We just get in our own way.
We try to overcomplicate things. But maybe those intuitive flashes we get, those aha moments, what if those are glimpses of that unborn mind?
I think Watts would agree with you. He says we should trust that wisdom, let ourselves be guided by instinct sometimes, not always relying on logic.
So it's not about throwing out logic completely. It's about finding that balance.
Yes. Intuition and reason, they can work together.
That actually reminds me of something else Watts talks about, the value of ritual, even if you don't have a specific religious belief.
He thought rituals were a powerful way to connect with something bigger than ourselves, to find meaning, even without dogma.
So it's not about the specific belief system. It's more about the act itself.
Yeah, the intention, the way it takes us out of our routines. Like, he talks about the Japanese tea ceremony.
It's a beautiful example, very mindful.
Right. It emphasizes presence. Appreciation for the simple act. It's a secular ritual, but so meaningful.
I bet you could create rituals in your own life, too, to add meaning to everyday things.
Totally. Like taking a walk in nature, really being present with it, or preparing a meal with care, even listening to music with your full attention.
It's about turning those ordinary moments into something special.
Exactly. The sacred doesn't have to be something separate. It's all around us if we pay attention.
And maybe that's the key takeaway from Just So. To let go of rigid thinking, to embrace the interconnectedness of it all.
To see the beauty, the wonder in the present moment.
And to realize that everything, as Watts might say, is just so. Well, this has been a fantastic deep dive. I always learn so much from talking to you.
It's been a pleasure.
For everyone listening, thanks for joining us. We hope you found this exploration of Just So as inspiring as we have. We'll see you next time. Keep questioning, keep seeking, and most importantly, keep that sense of wonder alive.
Follow the infinite within with Cecilia to explore profound insights on pantheism. Embrace the oneness of existence and unlock the mysteries within you.